Looks like we
Yay!
are
We're on
awesome.
the air.
So, all right, hey there. Welcome to Author Content, the show where we talk about all kinds of stuff with a bunch of people, mainly creativity, the web, and the 21st century. With me today, I have my co-hosts, including the extremely jet-lagged Morten Hendrickson, back in Vancouver, I imagine, after the big Twilight Convention to Romania trip that you made. What was that thing you did?
Twilight Convention. Also known as a wedding.
That's right. So your brother's wedding, right?
Yes.
So is Twilight really big down there, or is it just a,
Oh, we got schooled on vampires while we were there.
Yeah.
As long as you only get schooled and not eaten by them, that's fine.
So also with me, not just from any Carolina, but the awesome one in the South, is my other co-host, Mr. James Williamson. Probably the only guy who understands what the heck is going on between the WG and the W3C, right?
Yeah, it's all hate. Like they hate each other.
And we have two very special guests today. And first of all, we have Mr. Mordy Golden, all the way from New York, correct?
That was easy.
Nice. Very nice.
And also Mr. James Fritz. I think he's in California still. James?
No,
he's homeless at the moment.
I'm in Milwaukee, Wisconsin right now.
You're in Wisconsin, okay.
But you're not living in your house anymore.
Yes, I am. It's still my house till the 7th.
Oh, okay. So you're not officially homeless yet.
Not yet. No, not yet.
Okay. Good luck with that.
Yep. But soon enough, you'll be, I guess, moving to Seattle, which sounds awesome. I don't think I've ever been there.
And you can come for dinner. You just have to drive for 2.5 hours, and then you can come for dinner at my house.
That's right.
Sounds good.
And you'd have to cross the border and get the latex glove treatment. But yeah,
No. That's when you go back.
Oh.
I'm not taking responsibility for that at all.
So today we're talking about the humongous Adobe announcements that just happened a couple of days ago, and we've got a couple of people who were, super involved in that. I mean, Morty, you were actually there, right?
I was there in person in New York City.
Yay!
At the Adobe quote-unquote event.
That's right. And I mean, you got to see it live.
Everything that's new is new again.
Yeah, how was that?
It was actually a really nice event. A lot of people seemed to be excited about some of the stuff Adobe was showing, and it was Adobe lately with Macs and things like that. They have become pretty polished in what they present, so it's a good show.
Excellent. I mean, out of all the stuff that they mentioned, what do you think was the biggest sort of news, and what do you see them doing that's different now in this release versus other releases?
Well, I mean, this will probably talk a little bit more about, I think, what you guys are more familiar with than I am. But Adobe made an announcement all the way at the end that was kind of like, we just kind of stuck it in, which I think people are not really seeing how big or important this is. So there was a regular announcements. They shipped updates to all their major apps. They announced the new, stylus and ruler, the digital ruler, called Ink and Slide, which is pretty big hype around that. But towards the very end of the keynote, they just literally said, oh, and we're also building something which they're calling the Adobe Creative Cloud SDK. And what Adobe is basically doing is they're taking all the digital, mastery that they have created with all their graphics tools over the years, and they're turning those into APIs that people will be able to now build apps and other things on top of. Now, I mean, that they're just starting that now, but ultimately what Adobe is trying to do is create an infrastructure for high-fidelity graphics that are available anywhere in both software and in hardware. And to me, that's the most exciting news that I think that they announced.
Yeah, and SDK means that they're really opening things up for not just themselves to do, creative things, but then other people, right? That allows anybody to go in and do stuff.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it means that you would be able to technically build some kind of an app that takes photos, but you'd be able to tap into using maybe some Photoshop technology in your app. Or if you're a person who wants to create a really cool pen or some other kind of hardware that goes along with a mobile app, you can actually tap into somebody's Creative Cloud files and use the hardware or use some of the technology from that. So it's pretty exciting to me. The real thing is, it seems that Adobe is starting to take a back seat, saying we've kind of created now a world where these features or this quote-unquote magic, as Adobe likes to call it, what they can do with Photoshop, and now they want to democratize that and basically make it available throughout the world. So they just want to say, we created the platform, now everyone else should iterate and create awesome stuff on top of that.
Yeah, we saw Adobe do some things in open source. This is kind of a new sort of direction for them, actually opening up sort of the back-end API to like allow people to do a lot of cool stuff. That's awesome. Fritz, what do you think was the coolest thing that they announced?
I mean, the pen stuff is cool, you know, the pen and the tablet. But I think what's even cooler are those mobile apps. The two new, or actually 3 new apps that they released. There's a sketch tool, and then the perspective drawing tool, and then the Photoshop mask tool, and they are very well refined apps. In past years, Adobe released like these Photoshop Touch companion apps and a few other little ones, and they felt more like gimmicks, kind of just half baked, like, hey, we're just dabbling in this area to see what people think of it. But these apps are actually very full-featured, and I feel compete with a lot of the professional drawing apps that are on the market now. The regular Adobe apps that came out, you know, the updates to Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, etc., were great iterative updates, but I was really impressed with the fidelity of those specific apps that came out. Even without the actual hardware, just using my finger as a pen, playing with them, I thought they're very good.
Yeah, I thought so too. I mean, they definitely have a lot of competition. None of these products are sort of first to market. Like the pen tool isn't the first pen out there, and any of the drawing apps, there's plenty of drawing apps out there. So what do you guys think is sort of the difference, or you know, that makes these things kind of stand out from previous offerings?
Well, I mean, I happen to have one of the pens right here. Adobe actually was very nice. Whoever attended the live keynote walked away with both the slide, which is a little ruler guy, or a little telephone, as we like to call it, and then the pen itself. There are some pretty cool things, innovation around the pen itself, but there's a lot of innovation in that. I mean, Wacom has stylus. My personal favorite until now has been something called Pencil by 53, which is this is what it looks like. It's more of like a carpenter's pencil. It has a real wood finish, but the tip is this mushy, fat tip. Just to compare the two, look how small and nice the tip is for the pen. So you really
a lot more precise.
A lot more precise. I mean, if you're an artist and you care about, you know, using a good pen or a good pencil when you sketch, which pretty much everyone is, then the Adobe pen gives you that experience that's much closer to that kind of thing. So there's going to be pros and cons to everything, which I think is nice. But, you know, ultimately it's a pen. It's a tool that, you know, people use. I know there are incredibly talented artists that do their best work on chalk and a blackboard, or any pencil on any paper. So really, for me, the big difference is what does this enable from a workflow perspective. And what Adobe has started to do is at least allow you to do more than just use it as a stylus. So to me, the most impressive part about the ink, which is the name of the pen, is not the features of the pen itself, but what it allows you to do. So, you know, there's a little button that's on the pen. When you press that and you're using any of Adobe's apps, a little menu pops up, and you can add things to your clipboard. But the clipboard is in the cloud, tied to your Creative Cloud account, which means that it's paired to your pen. So I could technically be drawing on one iPad, copy something, go to somebody else's iPad, and then paste it. Or
that's really innovative. I mean, I think I saw somebody grab one of those and pick a color from somebody else's iPad and then continue their drawing on their own iPad, which I thought, wow, that's really, I haven't seen anything that does that before.
So for me, that's why I go back to that SDK thing, because what Adobe's going to open up is your ability to tie into that SDK. So right now, these features only work in Adobe's mobile apps, but if somebody else builds a mobile app and they tie into that Creative Cloud SDK, I could move my Photoshop files, because the SDK supports native PSD files on a mobile device, which is crazy if you think about it. and then you can move it around to all different types of apps.
So, Morty, can you go in, if I select something on the iPad, copy it to the clipboard, go to Photoshop Desktop and paste it in there, or vice versa, or is it only mobile to mobile?
Well, I don't know if there's a desktop version of the clipboard yet.
Okay.
The way that the app works on a mobile device is that it looks like it takes a screenshot. Like you press the button and you hold it on the screen, and then the screen flashes, like you're taking a picture or a screenshot on a mobile device, on an iOS device. And then when you go to your clipboard, like a window pops up and you could scroll through. You can have multiple items on your clipboard. I don't know if that experience is available on the desktop, but it's obviously stored on the cloud. It's something that Adobe could add. So that would be kind of cool. The other feature that they have, which I thought was really cool, is that you can be working on your tablet and then just simply with one click say send to Photoshop or send to Illustrator. And you don't have to do anything at all. It's not like, in the old days, like how do artists work now? I use the paper app from 53. If I want to be able to now open up and trace with that inside of Illustrator or Photoshop, I have to export it out to my camera roll, sync my device, to my desktop, and then open it up inside of Photoshop. Whereas here, I literally just, hit one button, and the file automatically just opens up inside of Photoshop. So again, I think that's the more exciting part about it. It's the workflow stuff. It's what those technologies let me do. It's less about the pen, and it's more about where Adobe is trying to enable that more seamless type of workflow. I know more seamless doesn't make sense.
Seamless.
Seamlesser.
Morty, the question I have about the whole SDK thing, I'm pretty excited about the potential of that. But in the past, Adobe's had a pretty bad track record with, putting things out there and then ending those services or not supporting them, in a really robust way. Are they giving any indication that their approach to this is going to be different as opposed to some of the things that they've done in the past?
I mean, not that I've seen, but I'll say that when Adobe first announced Creative Cloud, my feeling, like people were asking me, like, you think this is the right thing? And I'm like, all it means is that Adobe now has to prove that they can continue to provide value on an ongoing basis to their products. I mean, theoretically, Adobe could have just said, here's a subscription plan, we'll never add another feature to Photoshop again, and if you don't like it, too bad, go try to use another product instead. They have enough technology to be able to say that. But they've added a lot of stuff, and they continue to add a lot of stuff. So, the one thing that I will say is that I myself have seen a little bit of a shift in the focus of Adobe. They used to be like a feature company. It's all about the features that you have or the new things that are in a product. Right. And lately, and I believe this is attributed to one person at Adobe right now, whose name is Jeff Veen, who they got through the Typekit acquisition, who has completely, and he has completely changed the perception of what it means to be an Adobe customer and what matters to the member. And that, one of the things Adobe showed was now they've completely redesigned their website so that no matter what page you're on, you can access your account. That's all Jeff Veen. That's his work. He's the one who's basically focused on what that user experience is like. So if that continues on the way, then I think that Adobe will make good decisions from the SDK perspective on supporting what the developer community needs. But if the people who are running the developer and the SDK stuff have no insight into that side of the business, then I agree with that. You have the same concern as you do. You'll have a developer that will invest a tremendous amount of effort in creating an app, and then one day will realize that, oh, we've deprecated half of those APIs. You can't use that anymore.
So the idea with this SDK is for people to be able to build on top of existing Adobe products. So that means anyone who's going to use one of these apps that are built on the SDK needs to have a CC license. I'm assuming.
I don't know. I'm not sure how they plan on doing it. I mean, I would imagine that it would have value to somebody who's already a Creative Cloud subscriber because they're extending the reach, meaning that I have the ability to.
Well, my guess is they would simply expose services. They would expose the Creative Cloud services or the inner workings of the program, so that if you're going to create an app, it might be able to reach into a Photoshop document, and you might not necessarily have to have a CC license in order to have that happen.
Yeah,
so
that
was what I understood.
No, a big thing that I heard from them yesterday or the other day was that they're really focused on workflow. That's really where they're going. The apps are now mature enough that they really are going to have, this feature here and this feature here, but it's really got to be more about the workflow. And that's one thing that they can do that's unique with the Creative Cloud. Being now, I guess, this is what I consider the Creative Cloud 2.0. The first time they released the Creative Cloud, it was about having access to things. Now it's about making those things work together. So that's what I saw, I think.
I mean, a good example of that is in the Illustrator update. There's a small little thing of, let's say you get an Illustrator file and fonts are missing. And the Find Font dialog box will pop up, and if you happen to be missing fonts that are Typekit fonts, it'll automatically say, oh, this font is available to Typekit. Do you want to sync it? Sure. It automatically downloads, installs it, and turns it on. So I thought that was
I like that illusion that it does that, because that's not how it works at all.
for the desktop.
What matters is the magic.
These fonts are available on Typekit. Do you want to download
Yes.
them? Yes. And it says you can't download any of this because there's something wrong. Error 552.2555550.
Let's give them a break, man. It's brand new.
Well, Morten, I'll throw it at you, the question, which is more about the value of the SDK. I mean, it's not that much different than maybe WordPress. Like, they create a platform, and other people can create tools that plug into that platform and extend its value.
The reason I'm asking is, I guess the question is, are there going to be apps that ship for computers or for tablets or whatever that require that the person who downloads the app has a CC license? From an Adobe perspective, that'd be great, because it would allow them to kind of sub-market their product into environments where people wouldn't have bought a CC license. But from a user perspective, if that's the case, if you need a CC license to be able to access the stuff that comes from these third-party apps, then you will have a situation where people will download an app because they think it's cool, realize I have to pay $49.99 a month to get access to this app in addition to what the app itself costs. So I'm just, I haven't actually seen the release, so I don't know, but I'm thinking, from what you're describing, it sounds like that might be the case, and that is going to change how these apps are being built and what is being built on top of them.
Right.
At the very beginning, it may just be something like, hey, you have the paper app or 53. Now you can just take your drawings and put them on the cloud and access them directly through Photoshop. I mean, I know that even right now, I took a photo yesterday, and I'm like, how do I get this into my machine? And even that takes a little bit of thinking. That it seems to be where Adobe is going. I saw some of the technology, like in the Photoshop Lightroom for the iPhone. That seems to be where they're thinking, hey, we can simplify this process where people just think about being creative, and we think about syncing everything and giving people access to all their stuff.
Although, to Morten's point, though, in order to use that app, you have to be a CC subscriber.
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
Right.
Everything is synced through the cloud.
Yes, although I could see, potentially another way is if they, similar to InDesign Server. So InDesign Server, if you're not familiar, is just a headless version of InDesign that lives in the cloud that people are paying for. So like a lot of printers with variable data, you can go in as a customer, just go and say, oh, I want a t-shirt or I want a brochure or a book or something, and in their web interface, enter in everything, and behind the scenes, InDesign Server builds it and drop ships it to you. So something that I personally would love to see is like an in-copy variant for a mobile device or website that's using this SDK. So I can go and say, all right, here's my InDesign print layout for my client. They can go in and just proof it, make their changes, comments in a web browser somewhere, and have that sync back to my InDesign layout.
One thing I was thinking of was, I don't know if you guys noticed, but GitHub announced on June 5th that they now support viewing and diffing of PSD files.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
On GitHub, so you can just dump PSD files in, and then you can actually go back and forth in time and see the changes.
Cool.
I haven't tried it, but
Which, by the way, totally screws up my GitHub for Web Designers course.
Of course it does.
Thank you, GitHub.
That's always the case. But I can imagine. If the API works the way I'm thinking it does, that GitHub would be able to hook into that and allow, an add-on so that you could save directly to GitHub from Photoshop, for instance, and integrate the API more nicely like that, and kind of build a version control system on top of an existing, So there's potential there, and it looks like people are already trying to build this stuff outside of the existence of an SDK. So if they ship a proper SDK and an API to go along with it, There are a lot of external services that would be able to reap the benefits of.
That's
From a
something they
web-
kind of have in right now. Oh, go ahead, James.
Standpoint, yeah, from a web publishing standpoint, I'm really interested about that.
Currently,
No, go ahead. I'm sorry. There's so much. There's a little static going on. I couldn't tell that you were talking.
Sorry, it's okay. I believe it's in InDesign. It might be in Photoshop and Illustrator too.
No,
There's now this browse function where you can actually access all third-party extensions, scripts, themes, and other things directly within InDesign. And I imagine the other apps will have that too if it's not in it. So that'll be a nice discoverable thing. So if you have this in Adobe Store, you can just go and say, "Oh, browse this GitHub extension looks great." Click OK, and it installs it directly. So at least they're putting in the infrastructure to easily get it into the applications.
Oh, that'd be cool.
So, James, Mr. Fritz, the kind of interesting. The only product that was web-based that got a lot of love during the the keynote was actually Adobe Muse, and I thought that was a little surprising. I mean, it looks really cool, and it looks like they're adding some cool stuff. But why do you think they're just focusing on that? I mean.
I can field that one if you want me to.
All yours. Let me tee it up for you.
No,
Here you go.
I want to hear Fritz's answer first, and then I'll give mine.
Oh,
You go
fair enough.
first, Fritz.
I mean, are they having a lot of success with Muse? Is that where it's coming
Yes.
from?
Yes, Muse
they
has
are.
been doing very well. A lot of the migration into Muse is at Dreamweaver's expense. The graphic designers that didn't want to deal with coding and who were just pretty much using the WYSIWYG layout, the live preview layout features inside Dreamweaver, found Muse and fell in love with it because they just wanted to use just the layout part of it. The features themselves, there really aren't a lot of new features in the latest version of Muse. What it is they just completely redid it in a native application instead of being an Air application. Now it's 64-bit, behaves like a real Adobe application, supports all the RAM on your machine, and is fast and and works well. So there really aren't a lot of new features per se compared to previous updates to Muse, other than the fact it's fast in a modern application now.
So come on, James, lay it on.
Right.
Don't hold back.
I'm not gonna hold back. I mean, I've got a lot of love for Adobe. I got a lot of love for the people that work there. Friends with a lot of them. But I think it's a case where the marketing department gets more say in what gets pressed than the engineers. Dreamweaver has some really nice updates. They're more doing the things that they should have been doing with it, 5 years ago. But it's nice to see it actually happening within Dreamweaver. But Fritz is on the money with the fact that there are web designers out there that want to create a website, but they don't want to learn how to code. I mean, I've talked with hundreds of these people over the years. And regardless of how I tell them over and over and over again, it's very important that you learn how to code so that you can build your websites correctly. There are people that just don't want to do it, or, number two, don't have time. And for those folks, their only option right now is to use a service like Squarespace or Adobe Muse. And so yeah, it's filling a niche within the market, and you can you might laugh about it, you might say, well, it's not a serious product, but it is a serious product, and it's got a niche of people that it's perfect for. Is it ever going to be a perfect solution for a professional web designer? Probably not. But for what it does it very, very well. I know I get a lot of flack for hating on Muse. I don't hate Muse. I don't hate it. I don't. I would never use it myself, but there are a group of people out there that it's a great tool for.
Well, in fact, I just released a course, Up and Running with Muse, where I just go over it in about an hour. And the second movie in the course is Muse right for you? And I explain how it's fair warning, just telling them that this is a Venus flytrap. You can go in here and you can use all of it, but if you're going to want to expand this and hand this over to Morten or convert it to WordPress or eventually want to learn coding, you can't do anything with what you've made in here. It's a one-way street. So I just put that as a warning, but say, if you're okay with that and this is the type of website you want to make, well then definitely give it a shot and it might be right for you.
I'm just imagining the Muse to WordPress workflow right
Yeah.
Drop kick it.
That's my only beef. My only beef with Adobe out of all of this, though, is that the marketing department makes claims about Muse that simply aren't true. Like develop a professional website without ever learning to code.
They're speaking to a very. I mean, they have a specific target audience in mind when they say that.
Yeah.
They do, but
The same
I
way
just,
that
find
I
it
think
kind
if
of
you're a professional
disingenuous.
web designer, and that's what you do, or you're actually, I don't think there are that many pro web designers anymore. They call themselves now front end web designers or developers or whatever term is now being used for that. But
Yeah.
that person, if you approach them to build a website, like the price for that starts at 40 grand and goes up.
Yeah.
And they're providing you not just a website, but they're providing you a living, breathing presence online that will be able to do things for your company today and in 5 years from now.
Right.
Where, as opposed to when you go to a designer who's going to use Muse, they're the people that are saying, I can build a website for you for $2,000.
Yeah.
It's just a different type of person. It's like, comparing PowerPoint to somebody who's a professional, to Nancy Duarte kind of thing. It's a different element.
And there's also a huge market for people who don't either can't budget for or don't want to hire someone to build their website. They just want to do it themselves. And Muse is definitely kind of targeting that market. The people that say when they watch the Wix commercial on TV, want to build your own website, and they're going, yeah, but I want a bit more control than Wix. I'm going to get Muse instead. And
Right.
that's Adobe has done a fantastic job over the years convincing people that web design is not a real job. By marketing Dreamweaver to people who don't do web design, and marketing Fireworks and Flash and all this stuff to people who don't work in the industry. And Muse is kind of just a way of branching off and saying we have a separate product for those people now. And then the real people can work on Dreamweaver. Or
yeah, but their in-browser editing stuff looked really cool.
Yeah, of course it did.
I don't know if you saw that. They announced, I showed that at the keynote. That blew me away, that demo.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, the Muse stuff or Dreamweaver?
The Muse in browser. Wasn't it the Muse? Was it that?
Yeah, that was actually, it was a refinement. It came out I think in like the November update. That's when it first came out, but it's much more refined and a little sexier now.
Another thing that was really interesting that I heard was Adobe CS6 actually being mentioned a ton. It seems like they're trying to differentiate themselves from CS6 because it's still a really big sort of mainstay for people. People that have it don't know that they want to upgrade. So do you guys think that they have done enough to make people want to upgrade to this new version? Morty?
I mean, that's a really good question. I actually was wondering about that branding point myself. I mean, I thought it was inevitable that they go to a subscription model, and now with CC, they're saying, well, there are no more versions. It's just CC. But now they're having that problem, right, of saying, well, this was a big deal. So now they're saying CC 2014. So we're getting right back to some of the issues they had before. So I don't know. I know there are a lot of people out there that are just hanging on to CS6 for all they're worth because they just don't want to go to a subscription model.
Well,
but I think eventually, it'll get enough inertia where they'll upgrade regardless.
I think people sometimes forget that software is not like a car. Like if you buy a car, it'll still be running 10 years from now. It's not like that car doesn't run on these types of roads anymore. The car has a longer shelf life for that. And then maybe there'll be a point in time where you can't buy gas anymore in the United States, based on what Tesla is trying to do. Or the solar roadway guys, right? But
yeah, right.
But for the foreseeable future, you'll be able to find a gas station and load up your cars. If you buy a car today, you could, if you wanted to, still be driving that car 30 years from now. In the world of software, like if I buy a version of software, and let's say I own it, CS6, and then there's going to be a point in time where I don't have a computer that can run that anymore because the OSs don't, they keep evolving. So at some point your software doesn't support it anymore. People don't realize that even if Adobe were not to add a single new feature to each of their products, they would still need to put a tremendous amount of engineering effort into their products to ensure that they remain compatible with the systems that are available today.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So that's why Adobe really had to move to a subscription model, because there's no way that they could justify their business by saying, we'll keep selling the same version of Photoshop over and over again, and we won't have to do any work on it, and it will just last forever. No, they're going to have to continue to work on Photoshop and keep their engineers working on it, even if they don't add new features. So the subscription model was kind of
And they had this they had this very unrealistic 14-month release date where they, were bundling all these products together, and a lot of them were being shipped out the door that weren't ready to be shipped yet. And now they can develop things, at a reasonable pace and put out features when they're ready to go, rather than having to do. Although this event shows that they still see some value in coming out with a large announcement and updates across the board. So I'm kind of curious to see.
I still think that's talking though to people who have not moved to the cloud yet. Like that, and this big event was aimed at that. Maybe that's why they were talking about CS6, because that's who they're talking to right now. The people who are already on CC don't have to do anything because they got all those features already for free immediately at the, as they were announced.
Right.
But I will say though that some of the features that they've added have fundamentally changed the way that designers or people are going to work. Like that feature in Photoshop, that focus mask, where it automatically silhouettes things and mask type behind it or things like that. Those were things that as a designer, either I completely gave up and said I'm not even going to bother doing that effect because it takes too long to do it, or it took you 4 or 5 hours worth of work, and now it's not even it's 2 seconds. And like what Brian O'Neill used it in that Photoshop Mix mobile application by masking a cat and then on his mobile device with his finger in 11 seconds, and then sent it to Photoshop, and now he had a high-res masked version of his artwork on his desktop computer, is mind-blowing. And that's something that changes something that used to take, again, hours and hours of work for designers, and now you don't even need us at lynda.com to teach you how to do that.
Don't say that.
I don't need. Okay, I don't need.
Yes, of course, you need somebody to show you.
Well, you need us to tell you how to, how to do other things that are, how to make it useful, how to do something useful with it and meaningful with it.
And there's a whole other section to it too, with this foray into 3D printing. I don't know if it was in this release, but Adobe's really jumping heavy into that. And it's funny when you see Photoshop to 3D printing, and just making that connection of a photo editing app that I can now print. But it's funny because I'm in my community here in Vancouver. There's a lot of people who are really, really into 3D printing, and one of the big hurdles for 3D printing has been Autodesk. That's kind of where you need to be, and it's a very, very high.
I can't afford Autodesk.
And knowing, it's expensive. It's super complex. It's not for 3D printing at all. It's a completely different kind of thing, and you can totally see Adobe going, "Hey, this 3D printing thing seems to take off. We can just bake it into one of our existing applications and give people and see whether or not people want to use it, and kind of run a beta test." And that's what I was going to get to is. I'm kind of feeling like Adobe's using CC as a way of beta testing things live, because a lot of the updates that come out, you'll see small UI changes that are almost incremental, where you see they make a small subtle change somewhere without telling anyone, and then a week later there's an update and the change just goes away again. So they're obviously kind of brutally user testing things without telling.
Is that bad?
Oh yeah.
Really?
I think that's good.
I really don't like that.
I think a lot of people today embrace the idea of iteration and getting immediate feedback.
Not if it's something that's just ridiculous. And not if it messes with your workflow.
Like little cats show up and then they go away.
I wonder if this will work. I'm not talking about the 3D feature. I'm talking about when they make changes to the UI just to see if people react to it. And they seem to be doing that a lot now. So...
I wonder, Adobe used to pretty much throw everything new into Photoshop because they knew that was the product that everybody used. I wonder if that's really necessary anymore. Do they need to really come out with a 3D focus tab, 3D printing, 3D building focus tab, or do they just continue to do this thing where they just throw everything into Photoshop because they know that's their hot thing that nobody can live without?
Well, my guess is they do Photoshop first because it's something people are already familiar with, and then if it's big enough, then they can branch it off, right?
Oddly enough, they have teams of engineers working on the different pieces of software. It's not like they have one team that works on Photoshop and then goes over to Illustrator.
Well, I mean, I did some consulting work at Nike a few years ago, and they use 3D in their design work for their shoes, for their sneakers. And to me, I mean, they have a dedicated 3D application. If they design their shoes in a 3D application, then when they need to make a physical sample of that shoe, they can send that to a factory and get it manufactured, and it comes back just the way they expect it. If they give them a sketch or a 2D drawing done in Illustrator or Photoshop, then the person who's manufacturing it has to now translate that into what this means, how to build it in 3D, and that required back and forth, like sometimes even 2 weeks of iterations until they got it right. So the initiative always was to the design team, do it in 3D first. The problem is that you can't think like a designer in these 3D applications because you're building final pieces of art. So they want the freedom to be able to live in this free-flowing design environment like Photoshop, but they want to still get the 3D benefits out of it. Yeah. And that's where I think we've kind of seen the merging of those tools, because now a designer can do both. They don't have to give up the creative environment.
My take on all those new features is that it takes Photoshop so long to load.
I have to admit,
you're going to put a new feature in. What? Oh, am I breaking up?
Well, James, James.
You guys do your thing.
No, I mean, James brings up a good point, though. Like, you create an app that just has almost everything in it, you know. I can tell you that for a few versions ago, the Photoshop team created the app where it only loaded basic functions first, and then as you needed other tools, it would load it then. Mm-hmm. So, for example, they figured most photographers don't use the type tool in Photoshop. So what contributes a lot to load time when you first launch Photoshop is it has to load all the fonts. Well, why should we bother loading all the fonts if I'm never going to use it? So they don't load it.
So that's why every time I fire up Photoshop and click on the type tool, I want to throw my computer out the window?
Exactly, because then as soon as you click on the type tool, Photoshop now looks like it's frozen, because now it realizes, oh, you want fonts now? Okay, wait right there for a minute. I'm going to go get the fonts. And
I'll be back.
Exactly. So you have to weigh the two. Like, you either load everything up at once, and you see this on a website too, right? You can load all the data on a page at once, and it will take forever for that page to load, or do you serve up data as people need it? And there's going to be a balance to everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm just thinking if they put a feature in, they need to take one out. That's all I'm saying.
I hear that.
There's a max. So,
I think
James, back to the 3D thing with Photoshop. I kind of I've been thinking about this recently. I almost want to equate the 3D capabilities of Photoshop as what Muse is to web design. It's kind of a beginner introduction. It's good for people to get started with it, but if you really want to do serious 3D modeling, you need to go to Cinema 4D, you need to go to Max or Maya or some other application. Right. The difference is you can at least get files out of Photoshop and go to those applications if you need to.
I will say, in its defense, I did training at an architectural firm in Philadelphia. I think their name is WRT, in which I showed them how to take their CAD renderings and other renderings and then drop them into a Photoshop file. So they would take, let's say they were proposing a building, and they would take a shot of a street. Well, they could load in their model and then get it at the right perspective, and then apply lighting effects to it and things like that within Photoshop, and generate a pretty neat rendering or comp. And for things like that, I think it's great. But I think if people are looking to do a lot more with 3D in Photoshop, then they're probably going to be disappointed.
Yeah, to me, the slickest thing was the blurring stuff that they did. That stuff is super slick. Sorry, Morten, you were going to say something.
No, I was just going to say the other thing is the thinking is 3D printers are going to become ubiquitous in not too long. I mean, next year we're going to have a 3D printer that's probably going to cost $200. At that point, people either need to, if Adobe is able to then wedge their way in and say, and the software you use to print that stuff, like you download the render place on the internet where someone made your, your scale model petrodactyl or whatever it is you want to print out, and then you just dump it into Photoshop, hit print, it comes out in the size you want with the color you want. That's kind of, it just is a stopgap measure to solve the problem of, no, you don't have to install AutoCAD to do this. You can just do
Autodesk does have an application called 123D Make that's completely free. It's not as good as printing necessarily. Ryan Kittleson, who's one of our authors,
who makes that, Fritz?
Autodesk.
Autodesk.
Autodesk. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, 123D Make. It's a free application. You can do some basic modeling, and I'm pretty sure you can 3D print from it, but not as well as Photoshop. Ryan Kittleson, who's our main 3D printing author at Lynda, I shared with him that Photoshop was going to be getting 3D printing. He was a little confused and was like, why? This doesn't make any sense. But then he started to play with it and was blown away. He thought it was the best implementation of printing. So he would go and he would model elsewhere, like ZBrush or something, bring it in, and when he would hit print, it would analyze the entire structure and say, okay, you need supports right here. This is a little too thick. This might fail, and just automatically fix those things for you. Or in the past, in his pro applications, he would have to spend 5 hours tweaking all that and manually building it so it could successfully be printed. So there's a really lot of underlying technology they put in there. It didn't just say, oh, print screen, essentially. It's a lot more complicated, but he really gave him kudos on how well they implemented it.
So finally, there's a couple of really sort of big things for photographers. The whole Lightroom for for mobile and for desktop, the integration was pretty cool. But they did announce that Lightroom and Photoshop CC were now available as a separate subscription for $9.99, which I thought was pretty cool. I mean, what else did you see in there, Mordy, like for photographers specifically that they were giving?
Just reminded me, I have to download Lightroom for my iPhone.
But do you think that $9.99 was that? Do you think that's something that they had to do, the $9.99 price, because photographers are kind of?
Well, they were already Adobe was already offering that bundle for $10 a month, basically, and they announced it initially just to get people to move to CC who really were just photographers and only needed Photoshop and Lightroom. They didn't need everything else. So why pay $50 for stuff I'm not going to use? It was incredibly successful, and Adobe just decided, why stop? Let's just make it a permanent program, which is, I think, a right move, because there were a lot of photographers that were not buying into the idea of a subscription model. But if you think about it again, this comes down to, will Adobe continue to provide value to photographers, and how will they do that? Like, will they continue to have a steady stream of updates supporting Camera Raw for all new cameras that come out, for new lenses that come out? And then again, mobile apps that just help that experience for a photographer. And if they do, then I don't think that everyone will love that $10 deal. I think it'll be great. So it all points back to Adobe making a decision on their own. Like, you can't ask a question, is $9.99 a month worth it for this? Because I will tell you that today, for $10 a month, getting access to the full version of Photoshop and Lightroom and the infrastructure behind that is totally worth it.
Yeah.
Whereas
2 years ago, just even getting that for a month still cost you the same $600 plus $200. It was $1,000. So now for $10 you have access to that. Now, do you want to tell me, is it worth it on an ongoing basis for that? That's going to be up to Adobe to prove that they can continue to add value to it. And that value doesn't have to come as features. It can come as storage. It can come as ways for, if you're a photographer and you need to get, how many photographers now need portfolio sites to show their stuff off? Like, Fritz, probably most of the people who use Muse are photographers who just need to create a portfolio site.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you're providing value to, again, think outside the world of Photoshop and Lightroom. Think of what a photographer needs on a day-to-day basis. And if you're a photographer, are you willing to pay $10 a month to not have to worry about how you are able to run your business, and you'll always have technology there to help you. I think then that's a pretty good deal if Adobe can continue to provide that value to them.
It is, and the other thing, specifically for photography, Adobe had a really bad rap for a while with photographers, because what they would do is they knew when new fancy cameras would come out, and then they would ensure that they would release the next version of CC directly after the release of that camera, and then not provide support for that camera. So for example, when Canon released their Mark II, their 5D Mark II, which was like the groundbreaking DSLR that changed everything, Adobe made sure to release Creative Suite, I think it was 4 maybe, 2 days after the release of that camera. And then the argument was, if you want raw support for your camera, you need to upgrade to the next version of Creative Suite. And that basically forced anyone who was doing this to shell out like $1,500, $2,000 just to get the raw support. And it was ridiculous because the raw support was available for their DNG encoder, was available for all the other software a month before, but they deliberately held it back for Photoshop and for Lightroom, specifically to force people to purchase the new version. So now with CC, a new camera comes out, the new support just rolls back in. You don't have that problem anymore. However, now they're doing the colossally stupid thing of committing solely to iOS devices, which always pisses me off because it's really, really short-sighted. The app you're talking about does not appear on my Android phone. Your pen does not work on every touchscreen computer sold on the face of the earth called Windows computers. Yeah, I know. But they made a pen that is not available for touchscreen devices. And meanwhile, every single Windows computer sold today has a touchscreen device that has a touchscreen on it. There's no good reason why it doesn't support Windows, except it doesn't. And it's foolish because it means that all designers that are currently buying Windows computers with Wacom support that they could have been selling to, they're just losing them. And I'm sure that eventually they'll realize that, but it'll take 2 years. And
I don't think that Adobe has made
a
a public statement that says that we are never going to support Android or we don't support it. I think they chose to go iOS first because that's probably where their largest audience is. But I agree with you though.
I think they've had time though.
They should just come out and say it. There's nothing to be ashamed of. Just say we're coming out with iOS now. Android coming. Say it a year from now, whatever it is. Or I just agree with you. You shouldn't ignore it because that makes it come off as sounding as if you don't care about it.
And it's an odd decision because, for instance, the new Surface Pro 3 or 2 or whatever it is, the new thing that Microsoft released has a pen on it, right? And one of the major features that they were showcasing when they're releasing that computer was the integration with Lightroom using Microsoft proprietary pen. And Microsoft basically showed, hey, now you can be a designer and draw on your computer with a pen. This is the perfect solution for Adobe to see, yeah, you can get the Microsoft pen that costs like $150, or you can get our pen and ruler for $200, and it's much better and integrates better with Adobe. But no, you want it on the iPad instead. And then you just lose everyone who uses Windows computers in the process. And it's not like the iPad is a better solution for drawing things. It's not. A computer with a full-fledged version of Photoshop is a better solution for drawing things. But, that's a strange decision to make.
All right, so that is just about time. We went a little bit longer than usual. I knew we were going to have lots to say. So just final thoughts, I guess, from everybody here. James.
I have one final thing that.
Oh, okay, sorry, James.
I wanted to point out, and that is that's okay. That's all right. Adobe did drop support for FLV in After Effects and Media Encoder. You cannot export out to FLV or F4V files any longer from After Effects or Media Encoder. So read into that. Read into that what you will.
That is a strong statement.
That's a big thing that they did not talk about. Yeah.
All right, James Fritz, final thoughts.
I'll just share my favorite feature. That was just a little update in InDesign CC 2014. My absolute favorite thing is subtle but awesome. When you package a document, it'll automatically include an IDML and a PDF with a preset of your choosing. So that way, when you're just backing up your documents, hit that, puts it all together. Just a nice, simple way to archive everything.
That's nice.
Cool. All right, Mordy, the pen. What do you think? Is it the best thing out there? What are your final thoughts?
I think that this is
my. Maybe draw as well as you is what I want to know.
Yeah, people have asked me. I mean, so I'll tell you, I'm still kind of up in the air between my pencil, which I just love from 53, and now Adobe's new pen. So for the next month or two, I'm just going to start using both side by side and see which one wins. I mean, I'm happy that there's competition out there. Ultimately, the users are going to win because you now have better tools out there where mobile now is embracing the idea of art that is not second class anymore. So if you ultimately are a designer who thinks that the future of your work is always going to be in Adobe's tool set, then getting this tool will never hurt you because it will only add more value over time. If you're the kind of person who just is going to continue to do other things and always think about, hey, maybe working with Sketch or Pixelmator or those other tools out there, then it might be a pricey thing to go after.
Very good. Okay, Morten.
I have nothing.
Still recovering from jet lag.
Still jet lagged, yes.
I'm so tired.
I have to say that to me, the killer app is the integration. It's the same thing that Apple has. It's the one thing that they can do that nobody else can. Everybody has Photoshop that works in any sort of related industry. So everybody's always going to be using these products, but the way that Adobe can win is by just creating the integration that nobody else can do. Paper, these different apps are never going to have the cloud, the infrastructure that Adobe can have, and that's where I think they can win. So, anyways, thanks for watching. We'll be hopefully back here. Oh, what?
I do have. Sorry, one more thing. And
It's like
I
an
was
Apple
very
thing.
disappointed. Yeah, one more thing. I was very disappointed in Adobe for not having any announcements for Dreamweaver or any of the Edge tools. If you didn't want Macromedia, you shouldn't have bought them. Get over this thing. Thank you.
I have to say that was the weirdest sort of part of the show for me. I'm like, what happened to even just Dreamweaver? Just go ahead and mention one thing.
Yeah.
Really Muse, but anyways, thanks for watching. We'll hopefully be back here next week with your normal host who actually knows how to use Google Plus and can do a better job than I did. We'll see you guys next week. Take care.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Okay, stop in broadcast.